Why don't you talk to that family member anymore? When at my sister's funeral they told me I had no reason to cry because I wasn't really family because I was adopted. I was adopted within my own family. We were still biologically related. When the ex-husband got released from jail for spousal abuse and restraining order violations, she gave him my new home address. My first marriage broke up after 5 months. Before the divorce was final, a police lieutenant said if the ex had succeeded in kidnapping me, he would have killed me. The police believed me and the judge believed me, but my mother didn't. If there's one useful thing to draw from this, please don't dismiss a young person who wants to confide in you that one of their parents isn't normal. So many people brushed it off with, "You'll understand when you're older," and "she's trying her best," that I kept trying. Would have been better off if I'd followed my gut and estranged from her sooner. She's a very angry person. I grew up being my family, and mostly my mom's punching bag. Emotionally, physically, I faced it all. I remember growing up and telling my brothers from my dad's side how miserable I am every day. How I come home and the first thing I always hear is bitching about something, anything. About how my room was my safe place, that I wouldn't even enter a room if my mom were there. I brought it up over 20 years of my life in sporadic bursts, when we had a moment to bond. Every time it was the same. "Oh, she loves you. Forgive her," or "She's old, she doesn't have that many years left, you're the only family member who can live with her because you don't have your own family." I always took it as, whatever, I don't care, I don't have to deal with it, be miserable until she dies. It's incredibly Game of Thrones in my family. If my mother hated you for that moment, she would try to turn everyone against you. She'll be up early in the morning, until nightfall, talking shit about you to your other siblings, cousins, aunties, grandpas, neighbor's dog, everyone. My siblings would then, in an attempt to win over my mother's love/favor, which they yearned for because she never gave it, would start talking shit about that sibling also. The annoying thing is, they've all had it happen to them, yet they're all so willing to turn on each other the moment she commanded them to. A few times my mother has straight up called me to call my sister to bitch her out about something, usually the way she parents her kids, and I nope out of that situation real quick. Do your own dirty work. My family calls me Sweden because I'm neutral, I don't get involved, I don't want to hear about the family drama or who is in whose faction. I learned at an early age not to chase my mother's love because she doesn't know how to love us the correct way, with some semblance of warmth and support. My brother robbed my mom into poverty, she sacrificed literally every penny and went even in debt to cover for his lifestyle. Every time I bailed her out I knew I was funding her toxic relationship with him. When she was finally dying of cancer, and having a million other issues and struggles, both my sister, total different long story, and my brother were fucking nowhere to be seen. I stepped in and stepped up to help her out of her misery, making huge sacrifices. Career-wise, financially getting in debts myself, medical bills through the roof, and her house basically needed entire renovations, let alone mentally of being constantly exposed to extreme hardship and misery of someone you love the most. Even my big loved one, just left me 6 months into this rough situation, nothing as unsexy as a man struggling, bleeding and suffering to help out a loved one, I guess. Anyway, I carried my mom alone on my own shoulders till her very dying breath, holding her hands while people close to your heart just turned their backs and left you regardless. I showed them nothing but care and loyalty through my entire life. Since the funeral almost day to day now 3 years ago, died first week after New Year, I haven't spoken to any of them. They chose a rapist over me, and now that all his crimes have come to light, they're so sorry. No thanks. Her husband pointed a loaded gun at my husband's head. My husband didn't need parents anyway. My sister. She's been a sporadically recovering drug addict for like 15 years. The last straw was when she stole our checkbook out of my wife's purse. At our father's wake. I supported my 46-year-old son all his adult life. Through raising 2 of his children. I was spending too much money and I was going broke myself. When he wanted to move in with his girlfriend, I said no more and that he had to stand up for themselves. Of course I was a freaking bitch and haven't seen or heard from him for over a year. He hasn't even checked on his kids. Not birthdays or Christmas. Uncle punched me in the neck for no reason while drunk. Cut his ass off that same night. On Christmas at that. Because he was hitting on the nurse in the room where my mother was being compassionately extubated. Oh yeah, he's my dad. He's a pedophile, and a crackhead. Tried to have a semi-normal relationship with him where I would visit him infrequently and message him like once a month. Then one day while visiting him I found pedophilic fan fiction on his computer, smiley face. He spent my whole life trying to convince me the charges were bogus lol. He's my dad BTW. User avatar. Level 1. You puny humans. 11 hours ago. There are many reasons beyond this, but the final straw was from the last time I saw my step-grandfather. Went to empty the dishwasher for him, and he was at the sink, so I waited for him to move so I could wash my hands, and he looked at me and, well, why don't you fucking empty it then? And I simply said, I'm just waiting for you to move so I can wash my hands, and his response was, stop being a smartass. I told him, that's pretty rude considering I'm trying to help you. And he decided that attempting to fight me over that was appropriate. This guy is old and broken, he can barely walk, breathe or do anything for himself, the very definition of a decrepit old has-been. And yet he still got all up in my face with his fists raised and his eyes filled with hate. I said, really dude? Do you actually think you could do anything? I could blow on you and you would fall over. I would never want to fight someone in that condition, but I made it clear I would defend myself if he attacked me. He kept on trying to come at me. Eventually I got fed up with his shit, opened my arms wide, and said, go ahead, I dare you. I'll even give you the first shot, but I guarantee I'll get the last 1 inch. And he finally backed down when he realized he couldn't intimidate me like he could when I was a kid. She's a grandiose narcissist who projects all of her negative qualities on any and everyone. When I tried to have a talk about all the abuse I endured as a child, I was swiftly told that everything was my fault. She's attempted to pit my brother and I against each other for most of our lives. The memory that sticks with me was when I was 14 she said she'd make sure I never get to see my brother when we're grown up. My wife's mum. Among other things, she attempted to burn down my house. Whilst her daughter and grandson were inside. She's a piece of shit who's going to die bitter and alone, and that's just fine by all of her kids. My brother turned me in for Social Security fraud. Needless to say, I'm not committing any fraud. Had I been convicted, I would have a $250,000 fine, and would have gone to jail for 5 years. He can suck my dick. He is dead to me. My grandma, because every time I see her it's super dark and gruesome. Always talking about how she's gonna die and how the politics suck, and how I'm a terrible sister and how I'll never have a husband if I don't gain some weight. How my mom is bossy, how my brother is this and that. I can't stand it. I'm recovering from extreme depression, I can't have negativity on my mind every day when I talk to you. My aunt bought Christmas present for my son, not my stepson. I asked politely if we could buy a present for him and say it was from her, she refused. I returned the present unopened. After that, I've barely spoken to her for 20+ years. Uncle divorced wife. My cousin is late 20s adult now and by their parents' old house. Uncle decides to have his midlife crisis. Comes back, rents a room in house, traveling, marathons. Uncle finds new GF. They proceed to fuck loudly constantly. Cousins say knock it off or leave. Hearing his dad fuck is weird. Uncle leaves but takes more items from the house than he should have, including shingles for the planned garage refresh. This is considered a dick move. He did it without telling them he would. They just go home one day with random shit missing. Then uncle goes radio silent and won't speak to either of his kids, not the cousin who owns the house or even his older kid who wasn't even involved in this mess. So fuck that guy. Oh, and my racist grandpa, but he's dead now, smiley face. It was after a Christmas party. My mother managed a small hotel with rooms and 2 chalets. So she booked room for the family to sleep over after the party. One of my cousin take a chalet with her BF. It was only for one night, regular customers were coming the next day. All the family leave early on the next day and so do my cousin. Customer who booked the chalet arrive early, so my mother show them the chalet, assuming the chalet will be clean enough and that the customers could leave their luggage there till the bed was done. There was pee on the wall. My cousin and their BF literally pee on the wall. My mother was shocked and made her excuses to the customers. She called the dad of my cousin and we never saw her again. We know that her BF is now dead. He died of OD. Apparently I mocked their religion by putting a cross over our father's memorial. The religion was Christianity. I'm still flummoxed by that one. But I am still ghosted 2 years later. The term vulnerable narcissist comes to mind. I'm no longer on speaking terms with my mom due to a past argument that led to me being kicked out of my parents' house. Also, she does not acknowledge my existence anymore. I deserved it. I'm a white guy from Indiana who fell in love and married a Hispanic woman from Arizona. Went back to Indiana for my grandmother's funeral when my stepbrother wanted to tell racist jokes to my wife to break the ice and lighten the mood at the wake. Yeah. I don't talk to him anymore.